Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to the Tarot Talk Show podcast. I'm your host, George Dus, and I'm so glad you're here for episode 6. Last time in episode 5, we dove deep into using tarot in everyday life. We talked about why daily practice matters and how it builds fluency with the cards. And we walked through some core practices together, including the immersive journey into directly exploring a card, drawn from Matt Oren's work. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I'd recommend going back. It sets up some of the foundations we're building on today. Today, we're taking a turn that may surprise you. We're not talking about readings for guidance. We're not talking about shadow work or spiritual insight. Today, we're asking, what if the cards aren't just here to tell you something? What if they're here to create something with you? This episode is about tarot as a creative partner, not just for artists or writers, though they'll find plenty here. I'm talking about using the cards to solve problems at work, to brainstorm business ideas, to work through creative blocks, to imagine new possibilities when you feel stuck. We're talking about tarot as a spark for imagination, innovation, and co-creation. Now, I want to clear about something right from the start. When I say creative tarot, I'm not suggesting you abandon the traditional uses of the cards. Divination, self-reflection, spiritual guidance, those are all valuable and they all have their place. This isn't an either or situation. Think of it more like discovering that tool that you've been using one way, but can also be used in other ways. A hammer is great for driving nails, and it's also useful for pulling them out. The approach we're exploring today sits along traditional tarot reading. Sometimes you'll want to ask the cards, what do I need to know about this situation? Other times, you'll want to ask, what can we build together? Both questions are legitimate. Both create value. Today, we're focusing on that second question because it gets talked about less, but it's just as powerful. I'll be sharing a new spread I've been working with called Seed, Soil, Spark. We'll play something I call the what if game with the cards. We'll look at how tarot can fuel creativity in contexts you may not expect, like team meetings or strategic planning. And toward the end, we'll take an imaginative journey together where you get to step into the world of the card and see what it wants to show you. So whether you're a person who creates for a living, an entrepreneur trying to solve problems, a student working on projects, or just someone who wants to see tarot in a completely new light, this episode's for you. And if you've never thought of yourself as a creative, stay with me. By the end of this episode, you may see that differently. Take a breath with me. Settle in, get comfortable, and let's explore what happens when we stop asking the cards to predict our future and start asking them to help us invent it. Most of us come to tarot looking for answers. We shuffle the deck and ask, what do I need to know? What's the outcome? What should I do? What's blocking me? Is this the right path? And all those are valid questions. That's interpretation. We're looking at the cards as a mirror or a message, trying to understand what they're telling us about reality as it is and as it might be. Interpretation mode is about receiving. You pull cards, you study them, you reflect on how they relate to your situation. You're looking for meaning, for insight, for guidance of what's already in motion. It's like reading a weather report. You're gathering information about conditions so you can prepare and respond appropriately. But there's another way to work with the cards that get talked about less often. Instead of asking, what are you telling me? You ask, what can we make together? That's co-creation. It's the difference between reading a map and drawing one. It's the difference between interpreting a dream and actively shaping a vision. Here's what I mean practically. Let's say you pull the Three of Pentacles. In interpretation mode, You may look at that card and think about collaboration, skilled work, the early stages of a project that's taking shape. You'd ask yourself, where in my life is this energy showing up? Am I working with others effectively? Am I building something with solid foundation? The card is describing something about your current reality or near future. In co creation mode, you'd ask completely different questions. You may look at the Three of Pentacles and say, okay, this card is showing me three people working together on something meaningful. If I brought that energy into my current project, would it change? Who can I collaborate with? What if I stopped trying to do everything alone and actively sought input from others? What skill do these figures have that I could develop or partner with someone else to access? See the shift? You're not passively receiving information about what is. You're actually working with the card's energy to imagine and generate what could be. Or take a different example. Let's say you're working on a business idea and you're completely stuck. You can't figure out the right angle, the right audience, the right approach. You pull the Seven of Cups. In interpretation mode, you may see that as you're overwhelmed by too many options, or you're caught up in fantasy instead of practical action. That's useful information, sure. It might help you recognize a pattern. But then what? You still don't know what option to pursue or how to get unstuck. In creation mode, you ask, Seven of Cups, you're showing me all these different possibilities. Let's work with that. What if each cup represents a different facet of my business idea? What if I choose one? I need to find the thread that connects several of them. Or what if you're telling me that the overwhelm isn't the problem? It's actually rich material I haven't learned to organize yet. What system or framework could help me evaluate these options? The card becomes a creative partner in problem solving, not just a diagnosis of the problem. I first stumbled into this approach by accident, which is how most useful discoveries seem to happen. I've been doing a reading for myself about some content I've been trying to create for my social media. I kept getting stuck, questioning whether material was good enough, whether anyone would care, whether I was just wasting my time. I pulled the Eight of Cups. Now, the Eight of Cups traditionally shows a figure walking away from 8 stacked cups, leaving them behind to journey towards mountains in the distance. It's about leaving something behind in search of deeper meaning, about recognizing something that once satisfied you no longer does. In interpretation mode, my first thought was, great, should I abandon this project? Is the universe telling me this isn't worth pursuing? That felt discouraging and also somehow not quite right. The energy didn't match. So I tried something different. I looked at the card and asked, what are you inviting me to imagine? If this content I'm creating were a journey, what am I being called to leave behind? Not the whole project. What aspect of my original vision needs to be released so something better can emerge? That completely reframed everything. The card isn't telling me to quit. It was inviting me to let go of my attachment to how I thought the content should look like and discover what it actually wanted to become. I've been forcing a particular style because I thought that's what people expected. The Eight of Cups was saying, walk away from that expectation. Journey towards what feels authentic, even if it's less polished or less conventional. Within days, I completely reconceived my approach. I stopped trying to sound like other tarot readers and just started talking the way I actually talk. The content started flowing again. The stuck feeling dissolved. That's co-creation. The card became a creative collaborator, not just a commentator on my situation. Now, here's something important to understand. Interpretation and co-creations aren't opposites. They're not competing approaches where one is right and the other is wrong. They're two different modes, two different tools in your kit, and you can move fluidly between them depending on what you need in the moment. Sometimes you absolutely need interpretation. When you're confused about a situation, when you can't see your own patterns clearly, when you need outside perspective on what's actually happening, that's when interpretation mode serves you best. The cards act as a mirror, reflecting back truth that you may be too close to see yourself. Other times you need co-creation. When you're stuck and need new ideas, when you're starting something and want fresh angles, when you know what's wrong but can't figure out how to move forward, That's when co-creation mode becomes invaluable. The cards act as creative partners, offering possibilities you haven't considered. Think of it like this: interpretation is standing in front of a mirror to see yourself clearly. Co creation is standing in front of a blank canvas, with the cards handing you brushes and suggesting colors and asking, "What do you want to paint today?" Both are valuable, both are legitimate ways to work with tarot. But if you're only ever use the cards as a mirror, you're missing half of what they can do. And honestly, the co creation half is often more fun because it's generative rather than pure analytical. I started using this co creative approach in all sorts of unexpected contexts. When I'm planning content, I pull a card and ask, what energy wants to be expressed this week? What theme are we playing with together? When I'm stuck on how to explain a tarot concept clearly, I draw a card and ask, how would you teach this? What metaphor or angle would make this accessible? The cards have options, it turns out. Or maybe it's more accurate to say the cards create space for parts of your own imagination that don't usually get a voice. The intuitive parts, the playful parts, the parts that see patterns and connections your logical mind may dismiss as irrelevant. At psychic fairs where I read, I started offering clients a choice. After we're done a traditional reading about their situation, I'll sometimes ask, would you like me to pull a few cards and we can brainstorm together? Not for prediction, but for possibilities. Most people are curious enough to say yes, and those sessions end up being the most memorable for both of us. I had one woman come and ask about starting a business. We did a standard reading first, looked at the timing, obstacles, potential outcomes. All useful stuff, but then we shifted in co-creation mode. We pulled cards and asked, what does success look like for this business? Not just financially, but energetically. What feeling do you want your customers to have? What obstacles will actually teach you the most? What resource or skill haven't you considered yet that you may need? At the end of our session, she outlined a rough business model, identifying her ideal customer and recognizing several resources she hadn't been planning to tap into. The cards didn't predict whether she'd succeed. They helped her design a better approach to the attempt. That's the power of co-creation tarot. It shifts you from being passive receiver of information to an active designer of possibilities. Here's another way to think about the distinction. When you're interpreting cards, you'll ask, what is this card trying to tell me about reality? When you're co-creating with the cards, you're asking, what could this card help me build that doesn't exist yet? One looks forward and inward for understanding. The other looks forward and outward for creation. One helps you see what's true. The other helps you imagine what's possible. One gives you a diagnosis. The other one gives you a design process. Both matter. Both have their place. And the most effective tarot practice, in my experience, moves fluidly between both modes, depending on what the moment calls for. As we move through the rest of this episode, I want you to hold that mindset. The cards aren't just telling you things. They're offering to build something with you. Your job is to show up as a creative partner, not just a passive recipient of messages. The techniques and spreads we're about to explore all operate from this co-creative stance. They assume you and the cards are equal in collaboration, each bringing something valuable to the table. You bring intention, direction, and the ability to take action. The cards bring fresh perspective, archetypal wisdom, and unexpected angles. Together, you can make things that neither of you can make alone. All right, let's get practical. I want to teach you a spread that I've been developing specifically for creative work and problem solving. It's called Seed, Soil, Spark. This is a 3-card spread, beautifully simple in structure, but surprisingly deep when you work with it in co-creative mode. You can use it for any project or problem where you need fresh perspective or new ideas. I've been using it for planning podcast episodes, for working through blocks in my tarot practice, for approaching difficult conversations, even for figuring out how to organize my workspace more effectively. The spread works because it addresses three essential elements of any creative endeavor: what you're creating, what supports it, and what makes it surprising or memorable. Every project needs all three. The seed without the soil has no ground to grow in. The soil without the seed has no purpose. And both without spark becomes predictable and forgettable. Let me break down each position. Card number 1, the seed. This is your core idea, your intention, the essential energy at the heart of what you're creating or solving. This card shows you what wants to grow. When you draw this card, you're not asking, what does this card traditionally mean? You're asking, what is the essence of this project? Where's the central truth or energy that everything else will grow from? What's the one thing this project is really about? The seed card tells you your true north. It's a compass that keeps you oriented when you get lost in details or overwhelmed by options. Let me give you an example. Say someone is starting a new blog about their experience about chronic illness. They pull the Four of Swords as their seed card. In interpretation mode, they might read it as, you need rest, or this project requires careful pacing. Useful, but a bit generic. In co-creation mode, they'll ask, Four of Swords, what's the core truth about this blog? What am I really creating here? And what might come as, this blog is about creating sanctuary. It's about rest as resistance in a culture that demands constant productivity. It's about teaching people that healing isn't always about doing more. Sometimes it's about giving yourself permission to stop. That's the seed. That's the core truth that guides every single post, every design choice, every decision of what to include and what to leave out. The blog isn't just about chronic illness. It's specifically about rest as a radical act of self-care. See how much richer that is than just saying you need to pace yourself? The seed card often surprises people because it reveals that their project isn't actually about what they thought it was about. Someone thinks they're writing a book about tarot, but the seed card suggests that it's really about reclaiming intuition in a culture that overvalues logic. Someone thinks they're starting a business, but the seed card suggests it's really about creating community and connection. The seed tells you what you're really doing underneath what you think you're doing. Card number 2, the soil. This is your context, your resources, the conditions that will allow your seed to take root and grow. What's already present that will support this work? This card often points to things you already have, but may not be fully recognized or utilized. It may highlight skills you've taken for granted, people who can help, emotional or spiritual resources you can draw on, or even obstacles that may actually strengthen the work if you're engaged with it skillfully. The soil card tells you how to work, not just what to work on. Let's continue with that blog example. Say they pull the Queen of Pentacles as their soil card. In co-creation mode, they'll ask, Queen of Pentacles, what ground am I working with here? What will help this teaching take root? The Queen of Pentacles is nurturing, practical, grounded in body and the physical world. What may emerge is, the soil for this blog is my actual lived experience in my body. My credibility doesn't come from medical expertise. It comes from practical, embodied wisdom. I don't need to sound clinical or academic. I can write from a place of, here's what I've learned by actually living this. That changes everything about voice and approach. It also may suggest create content that's practically useful, not just inspirational. Give people actual tools they can use. Make the blog nurturing, warm, like having a tea with a friend who actually understands, rather than reading a medical textbook. The soil card often reveals that what you thought was limitation is actually a resource. I'm not a doctor becomes my credibility comes from my lived experience. I don't have a big budget becomes this has to be scrappy and creative, which is actually more authentic. I'm doing this alone becomes this project is a personal vision, not a committee designed compromise. The soil card helps you work with what is, rather than waiting for perfect conditions that may never come. Here's another way the soil card shows up. Sometimes it points to internal resources, patience, determination, curiosity, courage. Sometimes it points to external resources, skills you have, people in your network, tools or platforms you can access. And sometimes it points to contextual factors. This is the right moment for this work, or this challenge will actually refine and improve what you're creating. Pay attention to the suit of the soil card. Wands may suggest that enthusiasm and passion are your primary resources. Cups may suggest that emotional honesty and relationship skills will support the work. Swords may suggest that clarity and good communications are what you have to build on. Pentacles may suggest that practical skills, persistence, or even financial stability create the ground for this work to happen. The soil card is grounding in the best sense. It reminds you that you're not starting from zero. You're already standing on something solid. Card number 3, the spark. This is the unexpected element, the wild card, the thing that will make your project surprising and alive. This is where delight lives. The spark card often feels the most cryptic because it's pointing to something you haven't thought of yet, something outside your usual frame of reference. Your job is to get curious and let that card show you something genuinely new. Back to our blog example. Let's say they pull the 8 of Wands for their spark card. In co-creation mode, 8 of Wands. What's the surprise here? What will make this blog catch fire? What haven't I considered? The 8 of Wands is about rapid movement, messages traveling quickly, things taking off. What may come as the spark is sharing in real time, not carefully crafted, perfect posts, but quick voice notes or brief updates of what's happening right now. The spark is immediacy and rawness, not polished. That's the unexpected angle. It suggests that the most powerful content may not be that long, thoughtful essay, but quick, unfiltered moments. Here's what I'm dealing with today. Quick tip that just helped me. That immediacy creates connection in a way that heavily edited content doesn't. Or the 8 of Wands may suggest the speed of publication. Don't wait until everything's perfect. Put it out there quickly and see what resonates. Let the audience tell you what's working. The spark card gives you the element that makes your work surprising, memorable, and different from everything else out there. Sometimes the spark card will suggest an unexpected medium or format. You thought you were writing, but the card suggests video or audio may be more powerful. You thought you were creating something solo, but the card suggests collaboration would add energy. You thought you needed to be serious, but the card suggests humor or playfulness is actually what's missing. The spark is often uncomfortable because it's asking you to do something you weren't planning to do, something that feels risky or outside your comfort zone. That discomfort is actually a good sign. It means the card is pushing you to grow. So that's the spread: seed, soil, spark. Core essence, supporting conditions, unexpected catalyst. Now let me walk you through how to actually use this in practice. First, clarify what you're creating or solving. Don't pull cards blindly. Name your project clearly. I'm starting a podcast about tarot. I'm trying to figure out how to approach a difficult conversation with my partner. I'm designing a new service offering for my business. I'm stuck on a creative project and I need a breakthrough. The clearer your focus, the more useful the cards will be. Vague questions get vague answers. Specific focus creates specific insight. Shuffle your deck with that project or problem in mind. When you feel ready, pull 3 cards and lay them out in a row: seed, soil, spark. Now here's where the co-creative approach becomes essential. Don't immediately reach for the guidebook. Don't try to remember what these cards mean. Start by just looking at them. Look at card 1, the seed. Describe what you're literally seeing in the image. What are the colors? What's the dominant mood? What's the central figure or symbol doing? What catches your attention first? Then ask, what's the core energy or truth here? If this project had one essential quality, what would it be? What is this card telling me this work is really about? Don't overthink it. Let your first impression speak. If you're journaling, write the card name and whatever comes to you. Even if it feels wrong or strange, capture it. You can evaluate it later. Move to card 2, the soil. Same process, describe what you see, then ask, what conditions will support this work? What resources, context, skills, or approaches does this card suggest I already have access to? Pay special attention to the cards that seem odd matches for your project. If you're working on something technical and you get the emotionally focused Two of Cups, don't dismiss it. Ask what emotional resources or relationship skills may actually be essential here. The unexpected matches often hold the most useful insights. Finally, card 3, the spark. Let yourself get playful with this one. Describe what you see and ask, what's the surprise here? What haven't I thought of yet? If this card could add one completely unexpected ingredient to my project, what would it be? What would make this work surprising, even for me? This isn't the place for logical, sensible interpretation. This is the place for what if? That's interesting. I never thought of that. Once you have your 3 cards and your initial impressions, step back, look at them as a whole. How do they relate to each other? Does the soil clearly support the seed? Or is there tension? If there's tension, that's not a problem. It might mean you need to adapt your approach or develop a skill you haven't yet. Does the spark amplify the seed's energy or challenge it? If it challenges, ask yourself, is this showing me something I'm avoiding? A direction I'm afraid to go, but that may actually be essential? Are there any patterns across the 3 cards? Same suit showing up, suggesting a particular element or quality essential? Major arcana showing up, suggesting this project touches something archetypal or significant. Court cards suggest that you need to embody certain qualities or maybe collaborate with certain types of people. Let me give you a completely different example so you can see the range. Say someone is trying to figure out how to resolve a conflict with a coworker. They'll pull for the seed, justice. This conflict is really about fairness and clear boundaries. At its core, this is about establishing what's reasonable and what's not. For the soil card, 5 of Cups, the context is that both people are feeling disappointed or let down. There's grief here, possibly about how the relationship changed or how expectations have never been met. For the spark, Page of Swords. The unexpected element is bringing intellectual curiosity rather than emotional charge. Approaching this conflict with questions rather than statements. Getting generally curious about the other person's perspective. See how that creates a roadmap? The seed tells you what's really at stake. The soil tells you the emotional ground you're working with. The spark suggests an approach that may not have occurred to you, trading defensiveness for curiosity. You can use this spread for starting creative projects of any kind, solving work and business problems, planning events or experiences, approaching relationship conversations, designing new offerings or services, working through blocks or stuck points, even things like planning a garden, organizing a space, or figuring out your health routine. Any situation that you're trying to create something or solve something, this spread can help. The key is staying in co-creative mode through the process. Don't just interpret what the cards may mean about your situation. Ask them actively, what are we building here? What do you want to show me that I'm not seeing yet? I really encourage you to try this spread this week. Pick something you're working on. It doesn't have to be big or important. Pull your seed, soil, and spark cards. Spend 15 minutes with them, asking questions, exploring possibilities, seeing what emerges. You might be surprised by what the cards offer when you approach them as creative partners rather than fortune tellers. There's a technique that I constantly use now that's dead simple, but incredibly powerful for breaking out of the stuck thinking. I call it the what if game. Here's how it works. You pull a card, and instead of asking, what does this mean? You ask, what if this were true? Or what if I took this literally? Or what if this card's energy was exactly what I needed right now? It's a reframe that immediately shifts you from passive interpretation to active imagination. And that shift, from receiving to exploring, changes everything about how the cards can serve you. Let me show you what I mean with some real examples from my practice. I was working with someone who was stuck in a job she genuinely hated. Not just this is challenging, but truly soul-draining work in a toxic environment. She's been to several readers asking about when she could leave, when better timing would arrive. Every reading kept giving her some version of, be patient, things will shift eventually. Which may be true, but it doesn't help her feel less trapped in the meantime. We pulled the Eight of Swords, that card of being blindfolded and bounded by swords. feeling completely trapped with no way out. In interpretation mode, I would have said, yes, you're in a difficult situation, and left it there. But that wouldn't have been useful. She already knew she was trapped. So instead, I asked her to play the what if game with me. What if the Eight of Swords is showing you exactly how you're trapping yourself? Not that the situation is generally difficult, it is. But what if those bindings around your wrist are looser than you feel? What if the swords aren't a cage, but a fence you built for protection that now you have outgrown? What if you've been so focused on what you can't do that you've stopped seeing what you can do? She sat with that for a moment. You can see something shifting in her face. Then she said quietly, what if I'm actually more scared of leaving than I am staying? What if all this talk about financial obligations and timing is just fear? That's the what if game opening up truth, not through interpretation, but through exploration. We kept on going. What if you stay in this job but completely change your relationship to it? What if instead of seeing it as a trap, you see it as temporary funding for your next chapter? What if you gave yourself permission to look for other work without the pressure of having to leave immediately? What if you started treating this job as a learning laboratory? How much can you detach emotionally while you're still doing good work? By the end of our session, her external circumstances didn't change at all. But internally, something has completely shifted. She left with a notebook full of what if questions to explore. The Eight of Swords became a tool for examining her own thinking rather than confirmation of her victimhood. That's the power of this approach. The same card could reinforce feeling stuck, instead becomes a doorway to seeing new options. Let me show you how the what if game works with different types of cards so you can see the range. Major Arcana example. Let's say you pull the Hierophant for a question about starting a new creative project. Maybe a YouTube channel, or a blog, or a podcast. In interpretation mode, you may focus on tradition, convention, established systems. You might read it as following the proven path, or learning from those who came before, or possibly even you're too conventional, loosen up. But in what if mode, you'd ask different questions. What if following established best practices is actually the fastest path to finding my unique voice? What if I needed to learn the rules before I can break them effectively? What if my resistance to structure and convention is actually what's keeping me from finishing anything? What if there's wisdom and templates and frameworks that I've been dismissing as limiting? Or you can flip it. What if the Hierophant is telling me I'm being too rigid about how this should look? What if I'm following someone else's formula when I should be creating my own? What if the tradition I need to honor isn't the mainstream approach, but something older, weirder, or more authentic to my own lineage? See how these questions open up a card? You're not trying to pin down the correct meaning. You're using the card as a prompt for exploration. Here's another Major Arcana example. You pull the Hermit for a question about growing your business or building your audience. Traditional interpretation may focus on solitude, introspection, possibly a need to withdraw. You may think, oh no, this means that I need to stop promoting myself. What if questions? What if the Hermit isn't telling me to hide, but to go deep? What if this business needs to be built on genuine expertise rather than superficial visibility? What if slow, intentional growth is actually stronger than rapid expansion? What if I need to spend more time developing my craft and less time worrying about marketing? What if my niche is specifically people who value depth over flash? Or what if the Hermit is pointing to the content itself? What if I should be creating resources for people on their own solitary journeys? What if my audience is specifically introverts, seekers, people who do their most important work alone? What if that's not a limitation, but a clear direction? The what if game transforms potential negative or confusing cards into creative prompts. Let's look at court card examples. The court cards are particularly fun for this because they can be read so many ways, as people in your life, as aspects of yourself, as role you can step into, as approaches or attitudes. Let's say you pulled the Knight of Wands for a question about how to approach a new collaboration or partnership. What if questions? What if I brought the Knight's bold enthusiasm even though I don't naturally feel it? How would I show up differently if I acted as I'm very excited and confident? What if this collaboration needs more energy, less caution right now? What if I'm overthinking this and I just need to leap? What if being slightly impulsive is actually the appropriate risk here? What if the worst that could happen isn't actually that bad? The Knight of Wands becomes a role you can try on, an experiment in different energy. You're not being told you are this way or this will happen. You're being invited to imagine. What if you choose to embody this quality? Or take the Queen of Cups for a question about handling a difficult work situation. What if questions? What if the solution here is emotional intelligence rather than logical strategy? What if I need to pay more attention to how people are feeling rather than just what they're saying? What if compassion is actually more powerful than doing the right thing in this situation? What if I approach this the way I've approached a sacred child, with gentleness and patience? What would that look like practically? Court cards become invitations to experiment with different ways of being, different strategies, different energies. Numbered cards can be incredibly rich for the what if game because they often depict such specific situations and energies. Four of Cups for a business or creative project you're developing. What if questions? What if my feeling of being uninspired isn't a problem, but information? What if I'm bored because I'm trying to force something that doesn't actually excite me? What if there's an opportunity right in front of me that I keep dismissing because it doesn't look like the way I expected? What if stable and boring are different things and I'm confusing them? What if I need less novelty and more depth with what I've already have? The Four of Cups shifts from you're stuck in apathy to maybe you're looking in the wrong direction and missing what's already being offered. Seven of Pentacles for a question about long-term goals. What if questions? What if this pause to assess progress is actually what's needed right now, rather than just pushing forward? What if taking time to evaluate isn't procrastination, but wisdom? What if I've been so focused on doing more that I haven't stopped to see if what I'm doing is actually working? What if the best next action is strategic pausing rather than more effort? Nine of Swords for anxiety about a situation. What if questions? What if these worries aren't predictions, but just thoughts? What if my worst case scenarios are creative fiction rather than likely outcomes? What if the fact that I'm awake at 3 a.m. worrying means I care deeply, which is actually a strength? What if anxiety is just energy that needs direction? What if I channel this mental energy into planning and preparation rather than just spinning? What would I do differently if I knew these fears were just in my mind, trying to protect me, not prophecy? The what if game works because it bypasses your analytical mind's need to figure out the correct interpretation and instead activates your imagination. It moves you from trying to decode meaning to playing with possibilities. And here's what I've noticed. Often the most useful insights come not from the first what if question, but from the third or fourth one. You have to move through the obvious responses to get the surprising ones. Now here's where this gets really practical. You can use the what if game in professional contexts where you've never mentioned tarot cards. I have a friend who manages projects for a tech company. She was dealing with a team that kept missing deadlines and getting offensive when she tried to address it. The whole dynamic was stuck. She pulled the Five of Wands, the card of conflict, competition, everyone fighting their own battle, cross sticks going every direction. Instead of interpreting it as, yes, there's conflict, and stopping there, she asked what if questions. What if everyone on this team thinks they're fighting alone? What if they see each other as competitors instead of collaborators? What if the problem isn't the work itself, but how we're framing the work? What if they're all trying to prove something individually rather than succeed collectively? These questions led her to completely restructure team meetings. Less reporting on individual tasks, more collaborative problem solving where people help each other, more explicit recognition that the team succeeds or fails together, not individually. Within a month, the whole dynamic shifted. Deadlines started getting met. People stopped being so defensive. She didn't tell them she used tarot cards to figure that out. She just used the card as a creative prompt for seeing the situation from a completely different angle. That's the practical power of this technique. The cards give you permission to ask questions you normally wouldn't ask because they're too embodied in your default way of thinking. Here's another example to play the what if game that can be surprisingly powerful. What if I took this card absolutely literally for one day? How can I act differently? You pull the star. What if I act today like I generally believe everything will work out? Like hope was reasonable and optimism was realistic? What if I approach every interaction with that energy? What would I do differently? What conversations would I have? What risk may I take? You pull the hermit. What if I spend a day in intentional solitude? What if I treat alone time as valuable rather than something to feel guilty about? What if I gave myself permission to cancel social obligations and just be with myself? What would that teach me? You pull the Three of Pentacles. What if today I focus entirely on collaboration? What if I ask for help with things I normally do alone? What if I actively sought input rather than try to figure everything out myself? Who would I reach out to? What would I delegate? Taking the card literally, even just as an experiment for a day, often reveals patterns you weren't conscious of. You realize how much you default to doing everything yourself when collaboration would be easier, or how much you avoid solitude when you really need it, or how much your pessimism has become a habitual stance rather than a realistic assessment. One way to play the what if game that's practically useful for creative work or understanding psychological dynamics. What if this card were the protagonist of a story? Who are they? What do they want? What's standing in their way? What do they need to learn? Suddenly, the Eight of Pentacles isn't about diligent work. It's about a craftsman who's so focused on perfecting technique that they've lost sight of what they started. That's a character. That's a dynamic you can explore. What would help this person? What would their growth look like? How would their story resolve? The Queen of Swords isn't just about clear thinking. She's someone who's been hurt and learned to protect herself with clear, sharp boundaries and intellectual distance. What's her backstory? What would it take for her to soften without losing her clarity? What's she afraid of would happen if she let her walls down? I use this variation to work through my own patterns. What if I'm currently living out the energy of the Four of Swords? What does that character need? What's their arc? Where are they in their journey? That kind of narrative distancing can give you perspective on yourself that direct self-analysis misses. And the what if game works because it activates different parts of your brain than interpretation does. Interpretation engages your analytical, mind-making faculties. What if engages your imagination, exploratory, fun faculties? And often the playful parts of your mind have access to truths that the serious parts don't. Try this yourself right now. Think of a situation you're currently navigating. Something you're stuck on or something that you're trying to figure out. Pull a card. Or if you don't have a deck handy, just think of a tarot card that's been on your mind lately. Ask 3 what if questions about it. Don't censor yourself. Don't worry about whether they make sense. Just let it be wild, weird, surprising. See what shows up. What if this card is showing me? What if I'm supposed to do? What if the real issue is? Often 3 what if questions will surprise you. That's when you move past your default thinking and into genuinely new territory. The cards aren't just asking questions. They're inviting you to ask better questions, more interesting questions, questions that actually lead somewhere useful. And the what if game is how you make that invitation explicit. Let's get even more practical now. I want to talk about specific real-world ways that people are using tarot creatively that have nothing to do with fortune telling or spiritual seeking. Because when I say creative tarot, I'm really talking about any situation when you need fresh thinking, problem solving, or imaginative perspective. And here's what's interesting. You don't have to tell people you're using tarot. That's not the point. The cards are just a tool for generating insight. What you do with that insight is what matters. I know several entrepreneurs who are quietly using tarot for strategic thinking. One person I met at a fair runs a small marketing agency. She pulls cards when she's developing campaign concepts for clients. She'll shuffle her deck and ask, what's the emotional core of this brand? What story are we trying to tell here? What energy do we need to create? She told me about working with a local restaurant that was struggling to stand out in a crowded market. She pulled a six of cups for them. The card made her think about nostalgia, comfort, childhood memories, simpler times. She pitched them a campaign based on remembering when messaging. Remember when dinner meant gathering around a table with family. Remember when food was made with care and time. Remember when restaurants felt like someone's home. The campaign performed better than anything they tried before. The restaurant's whole identity shifted to emphasize comfort, nostalgia, and traditional recipes. Their business turned around. She didn't tell the client she used tarot cards. She told them the insight that came from working from that prompt. The card was her private creative tool. Another person I know uses a card pull at the start of team meetings, not as a reading, but as a conversation starter. I pull a card for our meeting today. It's the Three of Swords. How might that relate to what we're working on? Sometimes the team identifies hard truths that need to be spoken. Sometimes they recognize pain points in a project they've been avoiding. Sometimes it sparks completely unexpected connections. The card becomes a neutral object that everyone can project meaning onto, which often surface insights that wouldn't have come up in normal project discussions. Here's an approach that really works well for anyone who has to teach, present, or explain things to others, using tarot to outline the structure before they start. If you're planning a presentation, a workshop, a class, or even just an important meeting where you need to communicate something clearly, try pulling 3 cards and asking, what's the opening energy? What's the core content or challenge? What's the conclusion or takeaway? These cards become structural scaffolding for your intuitive mind to build on. Let's say someone is planning a presentation about tarot for beginners. They'll pull for the opening the Fool. Start with permission to not know, to be curious, to be at the beginning. Make it playful and approachable rather than mystical or intimidating. For the middle card, the Magician. Teach them about the tools. Show them what they have access to. Make it practical, empowering. And in the closing card, Ace of Cups. End with an invitation to trust their intuition and their emotional responses to the cards. The technical knowledge matters less than their authentic relationship with the images. That's an outline. They didn't have to force it or think it through purely logically. The cards gave them the structure, and their content knowledge could fill it in. Or imagine someone teaching something more advanced. They pull for the opening card, 5 of Pentacles. Start by acknowledging that even experienced readers sometimes feel that they're standing in the cold, doubting themselves, wondering if they're any good at this. For the middle card, the Hangman. Teach them to look at the cards from completely different angles. Show them how shifting perspective reveals meaning they haven't seen before. And the closing card, the Star. End with hope and possibility. Remind them that this practice is all about healing and illumination, not just prediction. Again, that's a complete emotional and structural arc. The cards aren't dictating content. They're improving intuitive architecture that could lead to better flow than pure logical outlining. This might be the most underrated application of creative tarot, using the cards to imagine how a conversation might go or to understand someone else's perspective before you engage. Let's say you need to have a difficult conversation, maybe with a family member, a colleague, a partner. Before the conversation, you can pull cards and ask creative questions. What might be their perspective right now? What if they were speaking from this card's energy? What would they say? You pull the Two of Swords. They may feel conflicted, caught between 2 difficult options, trying to maintain neutrality or peace but feeling internally torn. They may be in an avoidance mode, not wanting to look at the situation too directly because it's too painful. This doesn't predict what they'll say, but it gives you a lens for understanding that they may be coming from a place of internal conflict rather than opposition to you specifically. How does that change your approach? Maybe you lead with empathy rather than your position. You may be acknowledging the difficulty of the situation before pressing your point. Maybe you ask questions about what they're struggling with rather than launching into what you need. Or pull a card for yourself. What energy do I need to bring to this conversation? You get the King of Cups. Okay. Emotional maturity. Staying calm and centered even when the discussion gets heated. Leading with compassion but not losing your boundaries. Listening deeply without becoming reactive. That's actionable guidance. You're not being told what will happen. You're being invited to choose a stance, an energy, and an approach. I've developed what I call landscape mapping for big decisions. Instead of asking, should I do A or B, which could feel too binary, I pull cards to explore which option's landscape looks like. If I choose option A, what is the landscape like? Not good or bad, just what terrain would I be walking through? Then if I choose option B, what's that landscape? And sometimes, what if I don't choose either and wait? What does that landscape look like? The cards show you different territories. Then you ask yourself, which landscape do I want to walk through? Not which is easier or safer, but what aligns with who I'm becoming. I'm actually using this method right now for a decision I've been navigating. I've been doing psychic fairs for the past year, and while I love the immediate human connection and the energy of being surrounded by other practitioners, the reality is that traffic has been low than previous years. A lot of readers are noticing the same thing. So I'm looking at two paths: continuing investing heavily in fairs or shifting more focus to building an online presence. Psychic Fair Path showed me the Three of Pentacles: collaboration, building in community, mastering through practice, getting immediate feedback, learning by doing. The online path showed me the Hermit, solo work, building something at my own pace, depth over visibility, reaching people I would never meet face to face. Neither is better, but both are legitimate paths. But right now, the Hermit landscape excites me more. The idea of creating content that reaches people everywhere, building something sustainable that isn't dependent on event turnout, working at my own pace, going deeper rather than broader. That feels like territory I want to walk through right now. That's what this method reveals. Not prediction about what will be successful, but preference revealed through imagination. Which landscape do I actually want to walk through? Here's a fun technique. When you're stuck on a problem, technical, interpersonal, creative, whatever, pull a card and ask, what would this archetype solve this problem? You're stuck on figuring out how to structure a complex project. You pull the Empress. How would the Empress approach this? Maybe with more patience. Maybe letting things develop organically rather than forcing a rigid plan. Maybe by considering what wants to grow naturally rather than what should theoretically work. You're dealing with a conflict in a family. You pull Justice. How would Justice handle this? By making sure everyone's voice gets heard equally? By focusing on fairness over keeping the peace? By willing to make the hard calls even if they're temporarily unpopular? You're trying to figure out a technical challenge. You pull the Page of Swords. How would the Page approach this? With curiosity and willingness to experiment. By asking a lot of questions. By trying things that may not work just to see what happens. By not being attached to looking smart or knowledgeable. The card gives you a lens, a role, a different way of seeing the problem. Often that shift in perspective is exactly what breaks you through. A lot of people use tarot for understanding themselves, which is valuable. But you can also use it to actively design who you're becoming. Pull a card and ask, what quality does this embody that I want to develop? Then spend a week consciously practicing that quality. You pull the King of Pentacles. For 1 week, you act like someone who's grounded, reliable, financially wise. You track your spending. You follow through meticulously on commitments. You make decisions from long-term stability rather than short-term impulse. You treat your body like an asset that needs care and maintenance. It's like method acting for personal growth. The card gives you the role. Living into that role changes you. Or pull a card for a specific situation. How would this card navigate my current challenge? You're dealing with a major life transition, job change, move, relationship shift. You pull Strength. How would the strength move you through this? With patience? With gentle persistence? By staying connected to courage underneath the fear? By being kind to yourself through the difficulty? This is simple but surprisingly effective. At the start of a project, pull a card and set it somewhere where you'll see it while you work. This is the energy I'm invoking. This is my eye light for this work. The Strength card on your desk reminds you to approach challenges with patience and gentle persuasion rather than force. The Ace of Swords reminds you to prioritize clarity and cut through the confusion. The Star reminds you to stay connected to hope and the possibility even when the work gets hard. The card becomes a physical anchor for your intention you've set. Every time you see it, it reinforces the energy you're trying to embody. All of these applications have something in common. They're using tarot as a creative thinking tool, not as a fortune telling device. The cards spark imagination, offer unexpected perspectives, provide structure for intuition, invite possibilities. You don't have to be an artist or a writer to use tarot creatively. You just need to be willing to ask, what can we create together? Instead of what are we predicting? That one shift from passive reception to active collaboration opens up an entirely different relationship with the cards. And honestly, it's more fun. It's more useful. It leaves you feeling empowered rather than dependent on the card to tell you what to do. The cards become thinking partners, creative consultants, imagination catalysts, and that's available to anyone, regardless whether you consider yourself creative or not. Before we go into our guided practice, I want to take a few minutes to talk about the pitfalls I see and the pitfalls I've fallen into myself when people start using tarot creatively. These aren't just rules. Think of them more as things to be aware of, things that can limit the effectiveness of this approach if you're not paying attention. Mistake number 1, forcing connections that aren't really there. When you're working co-creatively, there's sometimes a temptation to force a card to fit your project, even when it's genuinely not resonating. You pull a card for a creative inspiration, and it feels completely off. There's no spark, no connection, no useful angle. But you think, I should be able to make this work. So you twist yourself into logical pretzels, trying to find the meaning. Here's the thing, not every card will be the right creative partner for every purpose, and that's okay. You have 2 options when a card feels wrong. 1, you can dig deeper, ask yourself more questions, sit with it longer. Sometimes the cards that initially seem wrong turn out to be exactly right once you understand them differently. Or 2, you can acknowledge that this particular card isn't the right fit right now and pull another one. In interpretation mode, doing a reading about your life, I say honor whatever card shows up because it's probably there for a reason. But in co-creation mode, you're allowed to say, thanks, but I need a different creative partner today. The key is being honest with yourself. Are you avoiding a challenging but useful card? Or does it generally not fit? If you find yourself constantly rejecting cards, that may be resistance worth examining. But if you occasionally pull something that doesn't spark anything useful, it's fine to draw again. Trust your gut. Mistake number 2, abandoning practical thinking. Using tarot creatively doesn't mean throwing out logic, visibility, or practical consideration. The cards can spark wild imagination and offer unexpected perspectives. That's valuable. But at some point, you still need to evaluate. Is this actually workable? Does this solve the actual problem? Is this aligned with my values and resources? If you pull the Fool for a business plan and interpret it as, I should leap into this with zero preparation or research, you're probably misunderstanding the Fool's wisdom. The Fool trusts the journey, yes, but he's still carrying a bag of tools. He's prepared for the journey, even if he doesn't know exactly where it leads. Creative tarot works best when it partners with your logical mind, not replace it. Let the cards give you ideas. Explore those ideas imaginatively, and then bring them into contact with reality. Ask the practical question, is this feasible? What resources would this require? Does this actually move me toward my goals? What are the potential consequences? Imagination and discernment aren't enemies, they're collaborators. I've watched people get so enchanted by creative direction that the cards suggest that they pursue it without asking basic practical questions. Then they're surprised when it doesn't work. The cards didn't fail them. They failed to bring adult judgment to the process. Use the cards to open possibilities. Use your practical mind to evaluate which possibilities are worth pursuing. Mistake number 3, using cards to avoid decisions. This is subtle but important. Sometimes people get so caught up in pulling cards about a project that they never actually work on the project. They keep consulting the cards, trying to get more clarity, more guidance, more inspiration. It becomes sophisticated procrastination. I'm guilty of this. I've had projects where I kept pulling cards and journaling about cards and designing new spreads around cards, all the while avoiding the actual work of, doing the thing. At some point, you have to close the tarot deck and start. The cards can give you direction, inspiration, structure, but they can't do the work for you. If you find yourself pulling cards about the same project repeatedly, That's usually a sign that you have enough information, and what you actually need is to take action. The cards can help you begin. They can help you when you're stuck, but they shouldn't become a substitute for doing. Mistake number 4, treating cards as infallible authority. When you're using tarot co-creatively, the cards are offering suggestions, not commands. They're collaborators with ideas, but you're still the one who's making the decisions. If a card suggests something that doesn't resonate, you're allowed to say, interesting idea, but no. If it points in a direction that feels wrong for your project, trust yourself. The cards are useful for breaking you out of default thinking, but they're not infallible guides to absolute truth. I've seen people take a card suggestion and follow it, even when everything in them was saying it was in the wrong direction, simply because that's what the card said. That's giving your power away. Co-creation is dialogue, not dictation. The cards speak, you speak back, you negotiate, you decide together. You're an equal partner in that conversation, not a subordinate following orders. Mistake number 5, avoiding difficult cards. When people first start using tarot creatively, they sometimes shy away from traditional challenging cards. Oh, I don't want the 5 of Swords for my project. That's about conflict and defeat. But here's the thing. Those challenging cards often hold the richest creative energy. The 5 of Swords can teach you about strategy, but knowing when to fight and when to walk away, about the actual costs of winning, that's incredible useful material for any project that involves competition or difficult choices. The Tower can show you what needs to break down so something better can emerge. That's not just destruction, that's renovation, renewal, necessary clearing. The Death can show you transformation, metamorphosis, the power of endings that create space for new beginnings. The Devil can show you what's compelling and magnetic, even if it's morally complex. It can teach you about desire, about what hooks people's attention, about shadow work. Don't avoid the traditionally difficult cards when you're working creatively. Ask them what they can teach your project. Some of my best insights come from cards I initially didn't want to see. The 5 of Pentacles may seem like a terrible card for a business project, but it can teach you about resilience, about marketing to people who feel left out or overlooked, about creating resources for people in genuine need. The 10 of Swords may feel awful for a creative project, but it could teach you about rock bottom as the solid ground you can finally build from, about the clarity that comes from total honesty, about knowing when something needs to completely end. Every card has gifts if you're willing to receive them. Mistake number 6, skipping through. This is the biggest one. You do a spread, you get the insights, you're excited about the ideas that emerge, and then nothing. You don't act on any of it. Creative tarot only works if you actually use what comes up. Write down your insights. Commit to one action based on what the card showed you. Make the call. Start the outline. Try a new approach. Have the conversation. Experiment with the idea. The cards open doors, but you have to walk through them. I started keeping a specific journal just for creative tarot work. When I pull cards for a project, I write down not just the cards and interpretation, but specific next actions. Based on this reading, I'm going to, the first step is, by this date I will, are just a few examples. The simple practice of translating insight into action, it makes it exponentially more likely I'll actually follow through. Ideas without actions are just daydreams. The cards give you ideas. You provide the action. These pitfalls all basically come down to one thing: staying in creative partnership with the cards rather than making them either too important or not important enough. Too important, treating them as infallible authorities whose suggestion must be followed regardless of your own judgment. Not important enough, pulling cards but not acting on what they offer. The sweet spot is the cards are valuable creative partners whose suggestions deserve serious consideration, and you're an adult with agency who ultimately decides what to do with those suggestions. If you stay in that balanced place, receiving the card's wisdom while maintaining your own judgment, creative tarot becomes an incredible, powerful tool. Not mystical, not magical in a supernatural sense, just genuinely useful for thinking in new ways and making better things. All right, we're going to shift gears now into something more experimental. This is an expanded and adapted version of the guided practice from last episode. but this time focusing specifically on co-creation rather than understanding a card. If you're driving or operating machinery, or if you're somewhere where you can't close your eyes safely, feel free to skip this segment and come back to it later when you finally settle in. This works best when you give it your complete attention in a safe, comfortable space. For everyone else, find a comfortable position. You can sit in a chair with your feet on the ground or lie down if that's better for you. Whatever feels right for your body. Have a tarot deck nearby if you want, or just think of a card that's been on your mind lately, or even better, think of that project or problem you want to work with today. Let's begin. Close your eyes if you're able to do so safely. If closing your eyes feels uncomfortable, you can soften your gaze and look down at a spot on the floor a few feet in front of you. Now let's settle in with the breath. I'm going to guide you through a simple breathing pattern to help you drop into a more receptive state. Breathe in slowly through your nose to the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold that breath gently for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now exhale slowly through your mouth for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. And pause. Lungs empty for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do that again. Breathe in for 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 4, 2, 3, 4. Pause for 4, 2, 3, 4. One more cycle. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Pause. 2, 3, 4. Now let your breath return to its natural rhythm. You don't need to control it anymore. Let your body settle. Notice any tension that you may be holding. In your shoulders, let them drop. In your jaw, let them soften. In your hands, let them rest open and easy. You don't need to hold on to anything right now. Now bring your mind to the project or problem you're working with. It could be something creative, a piece of art, a piece of writing, a business idea. It could be something practical, a work challenge, a relationship question, a decision you're trying to make. It could be anything where you could use a fresh perspective or a new creative direction. Don't force it or overthink it. Just let it rest gently in your awareness. You're not trying to solve anything right now. You're just acknowledging. This is what I'm working with. This is what I'm bringing to the cards today. Now I want you to imagine yourself standing at the edge of a forest. It doesn't have to be a specific forest you've been to. This is your inner forest, a symbolic space. Let it form itself however it wants to appear. The light is soft here, filtering through leaves above you. There's a path in front of you leading into the trees. You know intuitively that this path leads to the card that wants to collaborate with you today. The card has something to show you about your project. Start walking down the path. Take your time. There's no rush. Notice what's around you as you walk. Is it the morning light or evening light? What season does it feel like? What do you hear? Maybe birds, maybe wind moving through branches, maybe the crush of leaves or twigs under your feet. What do you smell? Earth, pine, maybe flowers, maybe rain. Let the forest be specific. Let it have texture and detail. As you walk deeper into the forest, you notice the trees beginning to thin out. The path is leading you somewhere. And then you step into a clearing. The space opens up around you. Sunlight or moonlight, whatever light feels right, illuminates the center of this clearing. And there, in the very center, stands a doorway. It's not attached to any building. It's not part of a structure. It's just a door, standing freely in the clearing, as if it's a doorway to something else entirely. Walk closer to it. As you approach, you see that the door itself is a tarot card, life-size. The image is painted or carved or somehow embedded in the surface of the door. Look at it. What card is it? If an image appears immediately, trust it. If nothing comes at first, that's okay. Ask, what card wants to work with me today? What card has something to show me about my project? Wait, be patient. Let an image form. Trust whatever comes. Don't second guess it, even if it seems random or not what you expected. This is the card that showed up for you right now. Now look at the card closely. Really see it. You're standing in front of it. It's as tall as you are, or taller. Notice the colors. What's the dominant color? What catches your eye first? Notice the figures, if there are any. What are they doing? What's their posture, their gesture, their expression? Notice the symbols and objects. What's in the foreground? What's in the background? Notice the landscape or setting. What kind of space is this card showing you? Let yourself really see it, as if it was for the first time. Now, reach out with your hand and touch the surface of the door. As you do, you feel something shift. The surface ripples, like touching water. The door is becoming impermeable. The image begins to glow slightly, and you realize this isn't a picture, it's a portal, and it's inviting you to step through. When you're ready, take a step forward and pass through the door. You step into the world of the card. Take a moment to orientate yourself. You're not observing anymore. You're here, inside this card's world. Look around. What's the ground beneath your feet? Is it stone, earth, Sand? Wood? What does it feel like? What's the quality of the air? Is it warm or cool? Still or moving? What's the light like? What do you hear? Silence or sound specific to this place? This is a living world. You're fully present here. Now remember the project or problem you brought with you. Hold it gently in your mind. Look around this card's world and ask, what do you want to show me about my project? What perspectives can you offer that I haven't seen yet? What do you know that I don't? Stay open. The answer may come in many forms. It may come as words, either your own inner voice or a voice that seems to come from the space itself. It may come as a feeling, a sudden knowing, a shift in your emotional state, a sense of clarity or direction. It may come as images or visions, scenes playing out, symbols appearing, paths revealing themselves. It may come from figures in the card, if there are any. If there are people or beings there, you can approach them, walk up to them, look at them. You can speak to them if you want. You might say, what do you know about my project that I don't? What are you here to teach me? What wisdom do you have for me? Then listen, wait, be receptive. They may speak to you in words. They may hand you something, an object, a symbol, or a gift. They may gesture towards something you should notice. They might even begin moving, acting out something you need to understand. Whatever happens, receive it. Don't judge whether it makes sense yet. Just receive. If there are objects or symbols in this world that stand out to you, you can approach them too. Walk up to them. Touch them if you can. Ask them, what do you represent in my project? What quality or energy or resource are you pointing me toward? How can I work with you? See what response comes. Now look at the landscape again. Look at the whole scene. Is there anything you didn't notice when you first arrived? Has anything changed? Has something new appeared? Or has something shifted position or quality? Often the card's world will respond to your presence. It's not static, it's alive. It rearranges itself to show you what you need. Whatever you notice, pay attention to it. These details matter. Take one moment here. Ask the card. Ask this world. What's one thing I can do differently because of what you've shown me? What's my next step? What's the next action I should take when I leave here? Wait for the response. It may be very specific. Call this person, or try this approach, or let go of this assumption. Or it may be more general. Move forward with courage. Be more playful. Trust the process. Whatever you receive, acknowledge it. Thank the card for it. When you feel ready and there is no rush, take whatever time you need. Begin to say goodbye to this place. Thank the figures if there are any. Thank the objects and symbols. Thank the landscape itself for what it shared with you. Turn and look for the doorway you came through. You'll see it, shimmering at the edge of this world. Walk toward it. Step through. You're back in the clearing. The door closes softly behind you. The card's image is still visible on its surface, but it's a door again, not a portal. Take a breath here. Notice how you feel. You may feel energized, or contemplative, or peaceful, or even a little disoriented. All of that is normal. Place your hand on your heart. Thank yourself for showing up for this practice. Thank the card for its collaboration. Now turn and look for the path that brought you here. It's still there, leading you through the forest the way you came. Begin walking back. As you walk, let your awareness gradually return to the physical room you're sitting in. Notice the temperature of the air around you. Notice the sounds in the room or outside. Feel your body in the chair or on the floor. The forest path leads you back to the edge of where you started. Step out of the forest and into your ordinary awareness. When you're ready, in no rush, gently open your eyes. Take a moment before you move or do anything else. Just sit there with whatever you experience. If you have a journal nearby, I strongly encourage you to capture what happened while it's still fresh. What card appeared? What did its world look like? The landscape, the colors, the atmosphere. If there were figures, what did they show you or tell you? If there were symbols or objects, what stood out? What was the one actionable step that the card suggested? Don't worry if parts of the experience felt unclear or strange. Sometimes the meaning reveals itself over the next few days. Just record what you remember. And if this practice felt powerful for you, know that you can return to it anytime. You don't need my voice guiding you. You can do this on your own. Just get quiet, think of a project or question, ask what the card wants to collaborate, step through the door into its world. The more you practice this, the more vivid and detailed the experiences become. You're strengthening a muscle, the muscle of imaginative engagement with the cards. And that muscle serves you not just in tarot practice, but in creative work of all kinds. The cards aren't just images on paper. They're doorways into living energies, archetypal wisdoms, perspectives that existed beyond your default way of seeing. When you step into them, you're just not reading about insight. You're experiencing it directly, vascularly, in a way that bypasses your analytical mind and speaks to deeper parts of yourself. That's the gift of this practice. So let's close our time together with a card for all of us to work with this week. Now, I want to be transparent about something. Sometimes when I'm planning an episode, a card will show up that feels so aligned with what we're exploring that it becomes part of the teaching itself. That's what happened today. The card that kept on appearing as I was developing this episode about co-creation was the Ace of Wands, and it felt like it wanted to be part of this conversation. So today's card isn't a random pull in the moment. It's a card that's been collaborating with me throughout the creation of this episode. And honestly, that feels right for an episode about creative partnership with the cards. On future episodes, this segment may look differently. When I have guests, they'll often pull a card for us. And there'll be episodes where I do pull a card in the moment without knowing what it'll be. But today, the Ace of Wands has been such a clear creative partner in building this content that it makes sense to share it with you now. So let's look at the Ace of Wands. In traditional decks, the Ace of Wands shows a hand emerging from the clouds or from the edge of a frame, holding a living wooden staff or wand. The staff is often sprouting leaves or small branches or roots, showing that it's not dead wood, it's alive, it's still growing, it's connected to its source. In the background, there's usually a landscape, mountains, a castle, open terrain, suggesting potential, possibility, and the beginning of a journey into unexplored territory. The Ace of Wands is about pure creative potential. It's the spark before the flame. It's the idea before it takes form. It's that surge of enthusiasm and energy that says, yes, I want to make something. It's the first impulse, the initial inspiration, the moment when you suddenly feel excited about a possibility you haven't seen before. For our collective message this week, the Ace of Wands is extending an invitation. It's saying, I have energy to offer. I create fire. I have enthusiasm and momentum and the spark of something new. What are we going to make together? This isn't about passive waiting for inspiration to strike. It's about actively picking up the wand that's been offered and using it. The hand in the card is reaching out, offering, but someone has to take what's offered and do something with it. So the question for all of us this week is, what wants to be created through you right now? What idea has been nudging you? What project have you been putting off because you're waiting for perfect conditions or complete clarity or the exact right moment? The Ace of Wands doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It says, start, even if it's messy, even if you only have the first step figured out, even if you don't know how it'll turn out, start. Maybe for you, that looks like finally beginning that creative project you've been thinking about for months or years. Maybe it's approaching a work problem from a completely fresh angle you've been afraid to try. Maybe it's having a conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's experimenting with something new in your tarot practice. Maybe it's simply allowing yourself to play and explore without knowing where it will lead. Wand energy is active, dynamic, sometimes impulsive. It's fire element, passion, enthusiastic, warm, sometimes burning a little too hot, but always moving forward. It doesn't overthink or second guess. It feels the spark and acts on it. The ace is specifically about initiation, first steps, new beginnings, raw, unformed potential that's asking, really, almost demanding to be shaped into something. And here's what I love about the Ace of Wands showing up for an episode about co creation. It's not telling us what to create, it's not dictating the outcome, it's not even suggesting a specific direction. It's just saying, here's creative fire, here's enthusiasm, here's energy and possibility. You decide what to do with it. This is co creation in its purest, simplest form. The card offers energy, the card offers direction, intention, action. Together, we make something that neither could make alone. The Ace of Wands is also reminding us that creative energy is renewable. You don't have to hoard it or be precise about it. You can use it freely, knowing that more will come. In fact, using it often generates more. Creativity breeds creativity. Action breeds momentum. So this week, pay attention to where creative spark shows up. Maybe it's an idea that pops in your head in the shower. Maybe it's a conversation that gets you unexpectedly excited about a possibility. Maybe it's a card you pulled in your daily practice that suddenly makes you see something in a completely new way. Maybe it's a random thought that makes you go, what if? When these sparks happen, and they will, because now you're paying attention to them, don't just appreciate them and move on. Don't just think, that's nice, and then return to whatever you're doing. Ask yourself, what's wanting to be created here? What's one small action I can take to give this spark some oxygen so it can grow into a flame? The Ace of Wands is an amber. It needs you to blow on it, to feed it, to give it fuel. It can't become a fire without your participation, but it absolutely wants to become a fire. That's its nature. It's not content to just sit there as potential. It wants to be used. And if you're feeling uninspired or blocked or stuck this week, the Ace of Wands is a reminder that creative energy is always available. Always. You don't have to wait until you feel inspired to begin. Sometimes, often, actually, you start moving and the inspiration shows up in response to your action. You don't need permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to see the whole path mapped out in front of you. You don't need more time or more resources or more confidence. You just need to take the wand being offered and take one step forward with it. That's the invitation this week. Co-create with whatever is trying to emerge through you. Say yes to the spark. Pick up the wand. See where it leads. The cards are offering you creative partnership. The question is, are you willing to collaborate? That brings us to the end of episode 6. Thank you for being here with me today, for exploring these ideas, for being willing to see the tarot as something more than just a divination tool or a fortune-telling device. Today we covered a lot of ground. We talked about the difference between interpretation and co-creation, between asking, what are you telling me, and asking, what can we make together? We walked through the seed, soil, spark spread, and how to use it for any project or problem. We played with the what if game to see how these questions open up cards in a completely new ways. We looked at practical applications of creative tarot across all kinds of contexts: business, communication, decision making, teaching, problem solving. We talked about common mistakes to avoid, and we took a journey together into the living world of a card to see what it wanted to show us. That's a lot. If your head is spinning, that's completely normal and okay. Here's what I hope you take with you from today. The cards aren't just telling you things about your life or your future. They're offering to build things with you. They're collaborators, creative partners, imagination sparks. They're available for active co-creation, not just passive reception. And that relationship, that creative partnership, is available to you anytime you're willing to shift from, what does this mean, to what can we make together? You don't need to be an artist to use tarot this way. You don't need to consider yourself creative in a traditional sense. You just need to be willing to play, to experiment, to ask new questions, and see what appears. This week, I really encourage you to try one thing from today's episode. Just one. Pull a card and play the what if game. Do the seed, soil, spark spread for something you're working on. Step into the card's world and see what it shows you. Just one experiment. See what happens. Before I tell you what's coming up next week, I want to ask you something. If you're enjoying the Tarot Talk Show, it would mean the world to me if you'd follow or subscribe. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Following or subscribing helps the algorithm push this content to more people, which means more folks get to discover a different way of working with tarot. And honestly, it helps me know that what I'm creating is landing for people. You may also share an episode with someone you think might enjoy it. Sometimes the best way to support something you value is simply letting other people know that it exists. All right, next time, episode 7, we're going to talk about something I get asked about constantly at psychic fairs and in messages: relationship readings. Not just romantic relationships, we're talking about how the cards can help us understand any relationship dynamic. What makes a relationship reading actually useful versus generic? How to read for relationships without falling into the predictive traps or telling people what they want to hear. And I'll share some spreads and techniques that I've developed specifically for relationship questions that go way deeper than, is this person my soulmate? Or will we be back together? Relationships are where tarot gets really interesting and really tricky. There's an art to reading relationship dynamics in a way that's both honest and compassionate, both insightful and empowering. I'm looking forward to diving into it with you. Until then, be curious, be creative, pick up that wand that's been offered this week and see what you can build with it. And remember, you're not in this alone. The cards are walking with you, ready to collaborate whenever you're ready to ask. I'm George Dus, and you're listening to the Tarot Talk Show podcast. Until next time.